April 1241. By midday, one of the largest Christian armies in Europe will lie dead beside a Hungarian river. The men responsible had erased 3 kingdoms in under 2 years. Hungary was supposed to be next. It was. What nobody expected was what this kingdom would become because of it. 14 years after Genghis Khan's death, his empire hadn't slowed. By the winter of 1240, Kiev was ash. The force closing in on Hungary moved less like an army than like weather. At its center was Subutai. In his 60s, his health failing, said to ride part of the campaign by cart because the saddle had become too much. His mind hadn't slowed at all. In decades of war, he had never lost. He didn't fight battles. He built traps. The official reason for invading Hungary was political. King Béla IV had given the Cumans refuge, nomads who'd fled the Mongols years before. Hand them over, the Mongols demanded. Bela refused. But the deeper reason was geography. The Hungarian plain was the last great stretch of open grassland in Europe, and to an army built for the steppe, it looked like home. Bela tried to prepare. He'd had the mountain passes blocked with felled trees. It didn't matter. Mongol engineers cleared a path through in 3 days. Subutai split his army into 3 columns, timed to arrive within days of each other. One to crush any hope of help from Poland. One through Transylvania. One straight onto the plain. On March 12th, that main force annihilated Hungary's border garrison in hours. Weeks later, Polish and German knights tried to stop the northern column at Legnica and were cut down just as fast. Then Hungary made it worse for itself. Rumors spread that the Cumans, the very people this war was supposedly about, were secretly working for the Mongols. A panicked mob murdered the Cuman king. His furious horsemen tore out of Hungary entirely, taking thousands of potential cavalry with them days before the kingdom would need every rider it had. Bela still raised an army of around 60,000, with Knights of the Templar and Hospitaller orders among them. On paper, it looked formidable. In reality, it was dozens of noble households who barely trusted each other and had never faced a Mongol force. On the night of April 10th, that army camped along the River Sajó, near a crossing called Mohi. The river guarded one flank. The bridge was packed with crossbowmen. For the first time in weeks, the Hungarians felt safe. They had no idea Subutai had spent 2 days mapping that river and had already found a way across it nobody on their side knew existed. The attack began before dawn. A Hungarian patrol caught a Mongol vanguard on the bridge, threw it back in a brutal night fight, then returned to camp celebrating. It wasn't a battle won. It was a trap closing. At first light, Mongol stone throwers cleared the bridge while miles south, Subutai's force crossed in darkness and came up from behind. What followed lasted most of a day. Mongol forces pressed in from 2 sides, pinning the camp against the river with no clean way out. By nightfall, a staggering share of Hungary's nobility, its bishops, and its finest cavalry lay dead along the Sajo, though the military orders reportedly cost the Mongols more blood than anyone else on that field. Bela escaped, barely, riding west and south toward the Adriatic with Mongol riders on his trail nearly the whole way. Across the open plains, defended only by wood and packed earth, more than half of all settlements simply vanished. But scattered across the kingdom were a handful of real stone fortresses, fewer than a dozen in the whole country, and something strange kept happening at them. Székesfehérvár held. The fortified abbey at Pannonhalma held. The Mongols arrived, studied the walls, and rode on. After 40 years of conquest, that almost never happened. On Christmas Day, 1241, the test came at the largest scale yet. Close to 100,000 Mongols crossed the frozen Danube and reached Esztergom, the wealthiest city in the kingdom. The lower town burned. But the people who made it onto the hilltop citadel found something the open plain never had: real stone walls and a garrison led by a knight from far-off Aragon, backed by crossbowmen who knew how to use the height. Batu's catapults battered those walls and failed. He sent men to storm it. They were thrown back, wave after wave. After mounting losses, the most successful general in the Mongol world broke off the siege and withdrew in fury. Word had also reached the army that the great Khan had died back in Mongolia, and the empire's princes were needed to choose his successor. By March 1242, the Mongols pulled out of Hungary entirely, in good order. They left a kingdom in ruins and a king who had somehow survived. Bela came home and got to work immediately. He'd watched a single citadel hold off the same army that erased his entire field force in an afternoon, and the lesson wasn't subtle. In 1241, Hungary had fewer than a dozen stone castles. By the time Bela was finished, there were close to 100 new fortresses, 2/3 of them stone. He rebuilt his cavalry too, welcoming the Cumans back and investing in the heavily armored charge that had been missing at Mohi. 44 years later, in the winter of 1285, the Mongols came back, tens of thousands of riders crossing the Carpathians through the same passes that had opened the door in 1241. This time they found a different country. Castles held every strategic position. Supply columns were ambushed in terrain Hungary now knew better than any invader could. Hungary used its fortresses as anchors and ground the invasion down for 2 brutal months. They were thrown back. No second Mohi. The kingdom swept off the map in a single afternoon, spent 4 decades turning itself into something that couldn't be swept away twice. The open plain that once looked like an invitation to Mongol cavalry became, stone by stone, the very thing that broke them. Mohi is remembered as Hungary's darkest day, but maybe the real ending of this story isn't the battlefield where thousands died before sunset. Maybe it's the citadel that didn't fall, and the kingdom that made sure, ever after, that it wouldn't have to.